Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke, and a very big welcome as always to my co-hosts Ewen McKenzie and Eddie Jones. But before I bring the boys on, a big welcome to you, the audience, and a big thank you, because over the last few weeks we've only been going for a short time. But we're trundling along there, the sort of 3 to 5, and then reaching up to about 10,000, filling a small stadium. But this week, the program absolutely blew up, and our Monday and Wednesday programs have jumped up to a full Sydney football stadium, 30,000. So listen, a big thanks to all of you, and particularly to our friends from South Africa who have joined us in big numbers. Delighted that you've joined us. And we did have a promotion where we were trying last week to encourage our 1,000th subscriber, and we're now closing in on 2,000, but there you go. But we did say that we would give a shout out to our 1,000th subscriber, and it's Mark Klazinga, which is Mark Klazinga 6175. You are the 1,000th subscriber to the Rugby Unity podcast. A big thanks to you. And if you could get in contact with us at info@rugbyunity.com.au, we will send you your prize. So big thanks to you, Mark. And also a lot of the comments and questions, just to go through a few of those before we jump into today's episode. Gary Emery says, "Hi David, thank you for uploading another informative podcast. Eddie and Ewen again showed their experience and knowledge of the game. Ewen particularly showed his attention to detail, commentating that he was surprised players did not undertake research study for the forthcoming game on the 14-hour long flight to South Africa." Leon Catharian said, "Eddie is a master at the game. Awesome to hear from him." Damien Chan says, "Wallabies need Ewen McKenzie back. Such a smart coach." Andre Wagner, "It's a privilege to listen to Ewen McKenzie. He is a proper rugby guru. I wish he could feature on more international rugby platforms because I think he has a genuine intellectual approach to the game which could benefit the broader rugby world." Anthony Lees, "As a Safa, I've just stumbled upon your show. Great stuff. Nice to hear from the Aussies at last, and great to see your team happening again." And finally, Rory Sullivan says, "Lovely to see Eddie on the podcast. He's always been a great coach. Unfortunate about Rugby World Cup 2023. That was a hiccup, but he is still a great coach." There we go. Would love to see him work with Rassie one day. Well, I think you'd sell tickets if Eddie Jones and Rassie Erasmus were on the same coaching team at some time. But listen, we'll bring you into the program, Ewen McKenzie and Eddie Jones, and I'll start with you. Ewen McKenzie, James O'Connor has been selected at number 10 to start in the first test match of the Rugby Championship. What are your thoughts?
Not surprised. I mean, I'm surprised, but not surprised. He was nowhere, and then somehow he was in the squad, and then he didn't seem to be in the pecking order. And again, Joe doesn't mind bringing the guys, jumping guys over the bench guys. So Donaldson got jumped, and then he got injured anyway. So another injury in training, and so O'Connor plays. So he's got heaps of experience. He hasn't played a lot of football in recent times, but he won't be overawed by the occasion. And he doesn't mind the physical side of the game. So I think it's a good option. But again,
there were very few other options. The only other person there was Edmed, and another injury in the final training session before a test match, which makes certainly a big change, given that he's unlikely to have run in that position right up until the last moments of the preparation.
Well, he didn't make. They haven't. Well, we don't know, but apparently they haven't brought Edmed into the side. They've gone to a 6-2 bench. So Edmed, and they talked about him only having 2 training sessions. I don't know what they did last week. I would have thought Edmed would have had a bit more time to maybe be a bench option, but they've gone to a 6-2 bench from what I read. So that's a sort of strategic change as a result of that injury to Donaldson. So it's all 11th hour too, so it makes it it sounds a bit chaotic. Maybe they function well in that space. It didn't hurt them last game with a few late injuries. I I guess we'll see what happens. But other than that, the rest of the selections have sort of flowed as you'd probably expect, barring injuries.
Your thought, Eddie Jones, about James O'Connor?
Well, the way the Wallabies are playing, and it's been very successful the last couple of tests, they don't really play with the 10. The ball goes a lot directly to Ikatau, and they've been playing off 9 predominantly. At Joburg, they obviously wanted someone physical in there, which O'Connor can do. He's an experienced player now, and probably one of those players that has realised that he probably missed the best part of his career, and he's trying to make every day a really important day for him. Certainly, I did a short time for that World Cup in 2023, and he impressed with his desire to want to keep getting better as a player. He was one of the most talented kids coming through, and as I just said, he probably never really fulfilled that potential. So he'll be looking at this as a day he never thought he'd get again. So I would imagine he'll play with plenty of energy, plenty of aggression, and he'll be nice and calm in that environment.
Yeah. Looking at the rest of the team that's been selected, what's your thoughts about the Australians?
Look, pretty straightforward, I think. Going on the back of the previous test, they picked their best pack, and the back line almost picks itself at the moment. So, the crucial area is O'Connor, and as I said, they don't really play a traditional 10 role. He doesn't touch the ball a lot from first receiver. You get that mainly from second phase off a forward, and they'll play off 9. So they've probably gone in with a pretty combative approach at Joburg, try to take the Springboks on. That sort of appear.
Now, we didn't have you on Wednesday when we were talking about the Springboks side. So what's your assessment of the team that Rassie Erasmus has selected for the first test match of the Rugby Championship?
Well, I think probably the only surprising selection is Esterhausen at 12. But given that they've now lost the left foot of Willie LaRue, his left foot becomes pretty important for them. We know the Springboks like to play a relatively high kicking game. So he's got a long kick and a good kick at 12. Just probably lacks a yard of pace. And that could be something that if Australia does get some quick ball, they might be able to expose.
And what about inside the forward pack? The not really having a traditional number 8 in that position, with Khaleesi being selected there and having Van Staden and Peter Steph de Toy in the back row?
Yeah, well, Van Staden's probably the hardest bloke on the ball they've got, apart from him and Quagga Smith. But he's a very hard, tough, plays low at the rucks, combative player, good player. The Toit's probably, over the last 5 years been the player of international rugby. He got enormous engine. Yeah. His work rate in defence is fantastic. And the way the Springboks scrum and most scrums now, the number 8's become almost a defunct position. Like the 9 picks the ball out of the scrum now. You've only got to tap the ball with the hooker's foot and he picks it out of the scrum. So it's almost like in terms of the delivery, it's gone to a rugby league scrum. So Khaleesi's just another back rower, and he fills that role. He'll play probably out wider. He doesn't have a huge work rate, Khaleesi, but he plays that wider role for them. When he does carry, he's a strong carrier. He stays on his feet and he generally generates quick ball and, he'll do his share of work in defence. So, pretty reasonable back row, mate.
Ewen McKenzie?
Yeah, well, I think Eddie's sort of reiterated what I mentioned the other day. I think the same. They got a really good pack. And I said that it's predominantly their best players and a smattering from their so-called second 15. So I think that they're pretty well placed. They've got a good bench to come in. The usual suspects that they can change the game. So I think that there's a bit going on there. Just going back to the Wallaby selection, obviously Valentini wasn't available, so we didn't talk about that. So they avoided a selection discussion around the composition of the back row because I thought Hooper did really well in the last test. And in terms of balance, it gives you that line-out option. If Valentini had been available, it'd be interesting to see what combination they might have come up with because I probably would have played Hooper, Valentini and probably Fraser McWright. And Tizano's not there on the bench. Even if the 6-2 split is still not there, so I'm not sure what's happened to him since the second test against the Lions. There's something that's Valentine not being available is a blow. I think he's been Australia's best player for some time, but he did well all the time he's on the field in the last test. But they've avoided a selection decision there because trying to squeeze them all into the back row would have been interesting.
Eddie, what would you have done?
Well, they didn't have a decision to make, mate. So, I think they've probably got their strongest back row in there. Like Tazano's an interesting player. He's hard on the ball, really hard on the ball. And I don't know whether he's still suffering social media poisoning, mate. Yeah. He still might be on the drip trying to get it out of his system. They've got enough poison in the
I don't know whether with the back, with the three, with Williams, Gleeson and Nick Champion on the bench, I would have thought Tazano would have given him a bit of a point of difference. So maybe if you needed to change the game, there would have been something. Maybe he's not fit, don't know. That hasn't been said. It just seems to be a surprise. I would have thought he would have given him a point of difference off the bench, at least,
I reckon that's a great point Ewan's making. If you compare the amount of information you get on players' status in Australia in rugby league, they have clear information. Generally speaking, only one or two of the clubs play ducks and drakes with the condition of the players. And I think in terms of creating interest in the sport, and that's what we're talking about, I reckon that's one of the things that in generally international rugby and domestic rugby needs to be tidied up. A clear status of the player's injury. So then, these sort of discussions you can do with better evidence and more objective information than trying to presume or assume something.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And let's stick on that for a moment because I had a conversation with one of the Australian journalists this week and he was talking about the announcements of the team. And obviously, Rassie Erasmus came out earlier this week, announced his team on the Monday. And a couple of the commenters on our YouTube channel pointed out that, in fact, he's done that regularly over the last couple of years. He's quite happy to put his team out there. What would be a reasonable option? I think in the rugby league, Eddie, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a Tuesday that they come out with all the detail and all the information. So then you've got the information that the media can then work with, to create the interest around the game. Would that be something that we could actually put in place? That it's a rule that we're going to move it from Thursday and we're going to push it up to Tuesday?
I had the idea that you announce a squad of 25 on a Tuesday, and then you don't have to do anything until kickoff, right? But out of that 25, you got 23 you got to play until your hour before kickoff. So you name your 25. That's your game day squad, and then you've got some flexibility to change the squad if you want to. Because if it starts raining, you might want to change the team that you announced earlier in the week. I just think it might add something to the game.
But if I was a journalist, don't you want to be talking about the combinations that have been selected, just like we are now there about Esterhausen and his left foot kick and his positioning and his combination with Creel? Don't you want to know the detail?
Yeah, well, I'm probably contradicting myself here, which is.
I think. I think when you watch Pemby, when you watch some of these AFL shows, they talk for hours about all the possibilities about moving players around and whatever, and who's going to play on who, because it's all. Once the game starts, they start moving players from that point on. So then someone's playing on someone else and someone's having a bad day and whatever. So they talk for hours and speculate for hours, and it seems to work in that context. In the rugby sense, I don't know. I don't think it's necessary. It'd be helpful for people like us to be able to know, because then we can talk more accurately. I'm not sure it's going to help journalists per se, because they're not overly accurate anyway. But it'd be nice for us to have a better idea.
But from a coaching point of view, though, did you always see that it was an advantage that you could hold back?
No, I not personally. You announced it because other things flowed off the back of that, team photos, all sorts of things like that. But you're trying to get you've got your team sorted, what you want to do on Monday afternoon. You know, you're already talking to the players, who's in and out and whatever. There might be a few players that might be subject to fitness or whatever, but generally speaking, you've got a plan, you've got your players sorted. So the journos obviously come along to the training sessions and they watch, and you might play ducks and drakes and run your reserves first, and so they try, and that's where the speculation comes from. You might want to do that, but you've got a pretty clear idea of where you're going. Me personally, I like the continuity of selection, and I've talked before about not having the surprises of players jumping out of nowhere and being in the team and then suddenly being in the team and then disappearing off into the wilderness. I like the idea of using the bench, and I think Rassie does it to some extent, making sure that players are sort of flowing in and out in a logical way, and so you can reward performance and performance over time. Some guys are maybe going to be perpetual impact players, like Quagga Smith we talked about before. He's always an impact player. He rarely starts. But there are other players that earn their spot in the team by playing successfully off the bench over a couple of games, and they earn a spot. They earn a start, and the same going out. And I think that's a logical way, and players understand that, and so that makes it gets rid of some of any of the backroom dynamics where players just are confused, and it's not always possible to make it clear, but I think the confusion side of things, it is there in the background. If players are suddenly in and out and jumped over, it gets a bit confusing after a while if it keeps happening. That's just my perspective.
So your perspective, Eddie, do you like to give the players and the wider group the clarity as to where they are, or do you like to keep them thinking and wondering where they might be?
Well, it depends on the group. Coaching England, where a lot of what happens in England doesn't copy Premier League, but it's Premier League definitely influences sport there because it's so huge. And they announce their team either the day before or 3 hours before kickoff. So all the players are engaged, they're training. There was that great story of Gary Neville, like he was saying they were playing Middlesbrough, and he knew at 12 o'clock Alex Ferguson comes around and tells him whether they're in or out. So everyone tries to avoid him. Anyway, he grabs Gary Neville and says, "Listen, Gary, you're not playing this week, mate, but in 3 weeks' time, you're going to be the most important player for us playing against Crystal Palace." And he walks away, he's feeling pretty happy. And then he thinks, why in 3 weeks' time am I going to be the most important player? But, so it depends on your team. With Japan, we've gone for, we named the side now Monday night, like really clear about the players wanted that. So we've gone with that. So as long as, I think as Ewen said, you've got consistency in what you do internally, and it suits the group, but it's the right thing for that team.
Mm.
Yeah, and you got to remember the Springboks train differently from everyone else too. We run the same program, but they train Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday like we do. So they're basically finished Wednesday afternoon training. By lunch, they get back to the hotel lunchtime. They've done their team preparation, so they've got a very short, intense preparation, whereas most teams in the world tend to train Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. So they have a long, more spread out preparation. And again, it's just, what you like doing as a coach, what you prefer.
So explain that to me. What do you see the benefits of having Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday as opposed to Monday, Tuesday, Thursday?
Oh, we're just got a younger squad, and I think they can do the work in 3 days, and they have a longer time to have a recovery. I think sometimes when you got an older squad, the Thursday works really well for them. You do a shorter run on the Thursday, and then maybe on the Friday you don't do too much at all. And from a coaching point of view, coaches like a Tuesday, Thursday, because you get that extra preparation day on a Wednesday. So it's here or there, mate.
What about you, Ewan? What were you? Were you a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday man, or a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday? No, the higher up you go, you do get dictated to by, the commercial aspects of the sport, and a lot of the Wednesdays sort of traditionally been a day when the lunches and things like that on. So you're sending people out to to go and appear at lunches and things like that. So sometimes to change it to you can do it, but you've got to line up with the things that were the commercial realities. So you've got to flag that and then do it well in advance so that things haven't been sold or promises haven't been made. So you've got to fulfill your obligations off the field. So that's part of it. But no, I was the Wednesday off program. It varied a little bit if you had a shorter week, depending on the preparation time. If you're in South Africa, you might do it differently. The Australia arrived there on Sunday, so they might have done a little bit differently. Might have recovery day on Monday, so they might have. They said they've only had 2 sessions, so I'm assuming they've done a Tuesday, Thursday, but I might be wrong. They might have done Tuesday, Wednesday. So there is a bit of adapting depending on conditions like that. But it's been traditionally the 2 days on, the Wednesday off, and then a sharper training session on the Thursday, which would be less than the game time. So it's almost like mimicking the game, not in terms of contact, but in terms of the intensity and the time. And then captain's run's really just memory retention stuff around lineouts and things like that, some plays. That's pretty stock standard. Interesting what Eddie says about South Africa and what he's doing. I haven't thought too much about it, but I will give it some thought now. Gives me something to do at night.
Hey, one more question, Eddie Jones, just around selection before I ask you about the referee and the impact of the referee. Ewen McKenzie made the point the other day that he liked the idea of Malcolm Marx starting the match. What's your thoughts around that selection?
Well, I like him starting or finishing, mate. I'd have him every day. It was interesting because he plays in Japan for Kubota, and he plays every game like a test match. Plays hard every game, and I think actually playing in a more attacking, looser comp, because he's such a hard, tough player, has actually helped him develop his game. But he's a wonderful player, mate. As long as he's on the field, I don't care whether he's done. If I was coaching. And, the other bloke they got, Bongi, they reckon he's the better scrummager. They all say he's the better scrummager of him and Marx. And Marx, as we know, is a 117k hooker with not much fat on him. And Bongi's short to the ground, scrums hard, aggressive. So you either have him at the start of the game or at the end of the game. With the opposition front row, you don't really care, mate.
Okay, well, listen, you say every week about the referee, you talk about the referee, and the referee is the Kiwi Ben O'Keefe. So, Eddie Jones, you can have first run at where do you think, what sort of influence he might have, and given that he has refereed the Australians during the Lions series, does that have any sort of impact?
Yeah, I think he's going through probably a difficult part of his career now. I think, when they come through, the young guys, they referee to how they want to be, and they generally do well, the good ones. And then they get in that middle part of the career where they're trying to adapt, they want to stay at the top, and they become a little bit less clear in their refereeing. And O'Keefe's probably at that stage now. He's getting to the later stage of his career, but he still wants to be a top referee. I found his refereeing to be a little bit complicated of late. I don't see a clear picture. Where when he was young, I thought he was a really, really good referee for getting a game going. He wanted the game going. He was hard on space. So you were able to get quick ball. I'm probably not seeing that, which will probably suit Australia at Joburg. But then again, mate, it's the old gold watch at Joburg. The old story. So if you referee well at Joburg, you get the gold watch. I'm sure that doesn't. I'm not suggesting that ever happens. That's part of the folklore, and that's part of the context of referee at Joburg.
So tell me that story. I've never heard the gold watch at Johannesburg story.
Mate, the old days of Super Rugby used to be red hot. It used to be red hot, the referees you get. And at Joburg, it was almost impossible to win. And after the game, the referee would be happy as Larry, and there'd be the joke that he'd have a new gold Rolex watch at the end of the game.
Mate,
Was
I coached a game in Hamilton, and the referee was in the queue at Ladbrokes before the game. I'm going, I can't remember whether we won or lost, but it was a worry. It was a worry.
He backed the winner anyway.
Yeah, exactly right.
So, Ewan, translation, if Eddie Jones is right and Ben O'Keefe has sort of entered this mindset, this period of his career where he's perhaps, thinking about the future, worrying about, whether he's going to get the next gig or not. If that is in fact true, how does that translate into the practical application in Saturday's game? Or Sunday morning in Australia's game?
I think he's always been a fairly intellectual referee. I've done some analysis on him in the past, back in the World Cup, and so all the referees have a profile. You can look and you get an idea. Some like to tick certain boxes. Some will make sure that certain things are in the repertoire or certainly adjudicated across the course of 80 minutes, but maybe only once, which makes it a bit erratic. He's always been pretty good around the breakdown. If you look across the Lions series, he had 3 different types of refereeing and 3 different types of approaches at the breakdown. I think Australia will be more familiar with him in terms of the style. Being a Kiwi, I think there'll be more affinity there. But there is this constant pressure. You feel it with the refereeing community. The IOB is always looking for the next best thing coming through. They're also trying to diversify across various nations and bring guys through in terms of refereeing options, and that's working. But that means you've got to stay relevant, and so some people just get stale just because they're a known quantity. So I don't know. I don't. Eddie would know more than I, but I think he's a good referee. He possibly might suit Australia more in this game, but I do feel like he can hear the footsteps a little bit, and so the problem with that is with recent events, third man in, some of the things that went on in the Lions series, the IRB will be putting pressure on, and he's being an experienced referee. Probably won't like that. He'll like the fact that he's being an experienced referee, that he manages it, and we've seen that with the senior referees in the past. He's on the cusp of that space. So how he react to the IOB sort of setting the tone about what's important game by game, that might show up. I don't know, but certainly the argy-bargy we saw in the third test and a bit in the second test, that's going to that might come into play. And I always keep saying discipline. These sort of games are going to get sorted out by discipline, yellow cards and stuff like that. And I look through the history of the yellow cards in the. There's always yellow cards in the Springbok games. So not always the Springboks, but they're always in those games. So discipline's a key factor.
I reckon that there's a couple of things that'll happen. One, the TMO won't be having a day off. Like, he'll be red hot, mate.
Yeah,
it'll be
100%.
red hot. It'll be double time. And I reckon the early part of the Rugby Championship might be littered with yellow cards.
Yeah,
because I think they want to make a statement post the Lions. They won't be happy with the fracas that happened. They won't be happy with the controversy they had about cleaning out players' heads. So they'll want to make a statement on that. And generally when that happens, the reaction goes right to the extreme and then it comes back. So by the end of the Rugby Championship, the refereeing will probably be pretty good. But at the start, it could be red hot on any sort of infraction.
So on there with O'Keefe, the key is how the referees interact with the TMO. Now, some referees are confident to make a call. Some will default to the TMO to make the call. I think O'Keefe's his own man, so I think that'll be where not confusion, but that's where the challenge will be about where he sits in terms of whatever IRB directives there are versus what the TMO is yelling in his ear and how often the TMO is yelling in his ear. So that'll be a game within a game, and whether he can just push that to one side and be his own man. And I think he's in that. He's a mature referee. I think he's in that space where he wants to be his own man and manage the game himself, not have 5 guys in his ear telling him what to do.
Well, I think you saw that during the Lions series where he did actually, you could sort of sense the irritation in his voice about, I've got it under control. Sorry, Eddie, I interrupted you.
No, you're right, mate. I was just going to add, I reckon, just going on what you were saying and what you're saying, he's a really bright guy. He's an optometrist by trade. He's intellectually sharp, and he's a good rugby man. Like, he's a really good rugby man. So I just hope he doesn't get this overt pressure to try to referee a certain way, that he's allowed to referee well, because he is a good referee.
But you're pretty convinced that World Rugby will have lowered the boom and sent very clear instructions that no nonsense.
Well, you've got the hotline to the chairman. I'm waiting on hearing what you said to him.
No, I haven't spoken to him. I might ring him after this and find out. Anyway, I think that's...
Mate, they'll be polishing the leather patches, mate. They'll be out this week.
The best referees in recent decades have been smart guys who have been their own man. You go like Barnes and these sorts of guys. They're able just to manage it calmly and whatever, but they did it themselves. Yeah, they needed a little bit of help sometimes to get another angle or view or something, but they just wanted to manage the game themselves. And all the guys that you remember in the refereeing community are those types of guys, going right back. Derek Bevan, those sorts of guys, there's plenty of them, but they are their own men on the field, and that's where I think we've got to try and keep it. These other people are there to assist, but they're not there to run the game on their behalf. They're not de facto referees. They're just there to assist the referee, but if the referee doesn't want assistance, that's fine. You just got to let him have his space.
But it's pretty clear, though, isn't it, that the TMO, we still haven't got it right, and we're still going to have to keep talking about it until it becomes an additive to the game, because otherwise it's going to continue to impact the game, impact the spectacle, and continue to be a problem. So we're going to keep talking about it. I'm going to keep having to talk about it. But listen, we do have to move on. There's plenty more to talk about. We're going to also preview the All Blacks Argentina match. But before we leave Johannesburg, here are some statistics before I ask you exactly what you think is going to happen. The Wallabies have lost their last 8 tests in South Africa. The Wallabies have lost their last 4 tests to South Africa. They haven't won at Ellis Park since 1963. And South Africa has won 6 of their last 7 matches at Ellis Park. Ewen McKenzie,
first of all, just looking at statistics, we don't play them at Ellis Park that often. We tend to get them in Durban or Cape Town, or maybe Pretoria. So we haven't played them there that often. I'm not sure how many times, but that's in terms of debunking statistics. All those other things, it's hard to win over there, but it's not impossible. So you got to go there with some. Again, you go back to selection and tactics. You got to go there with a plan, and discipline. I think discipline will be a big part of the occasion, and you've got to make sure you're on the right side of it.
Okay, and what's going to happen?
Well, I think it's going to be tough, but if Australia can, I would love to have seen Tizano there, because I think that could have changed and put some intensity into the back end of the game. I kind of think that Australia might do well for 50 minutes maybe, but it's going to be hard to be there for 80, but not impossible. There has to be, they're going to change players on the field, so are we. So it's going to be the performance of the bench. We're probably a bit undermanned maybe up front in the second half in terms of impact, in terms of set-piece impact, but we've got some good ball carriers and the like coming onto the field. So if we play the game in the right area, and maybe we're going to play it a bit tight at them and continue to what we did against the Lions and take confidence out of that we can be there and give ourselves a chance.
All right. And Eddie Jones, your thoughts?
I think the 2 key contests will be the scrum. I think the scrum will come back into the game, and South Africa will probably have an advantage in the second half. Maybe the first half's going to be pretty tight and not much in it. I think second half they'll get an advantage, and I think the second biggest contest will be the aerial contest. I think there'll be a lot of high balls, and whoever can kick accurately early and win some ball back and get double possessions will go to establishing a lead. But it's hard for me to see Australia sticking there for 80. I think they'll give it a red hot go. They'll play well, but South Africa might be a bit strong. But the only thing I'd say, and again I'm going to contradict myself here, is that South Africa came off the back of 3 easy tests. They haven't had great tests, and Australia's had the benefit of 3 hard tests, like 3 really hard, and that could hold them in good stead.
Very good. Well, certainly something to look forward to, but I think that Sanzar has missed a trick around this particular opening weekend, and I do want to ask you about the fact that this indeed could be the last Rugby Championship, now that the All Blacks and South Africa have decided that they'd like to play each other more next year. We know that the All Blacks are going to tour South Africa. In 2030, South Africa will be touring New Zealand. Obviously, we have this shortened season around 2027. But it seems that the Rugby Championship, as we know it, may no longer be in its form. And maybe that's got something to do with it. But I've just spent the last day or so just having a bit of a look around from a media point of view. And I just think this is a wonderful competition. And we are a sport that independently verified has 500 million fans around the world. But if you go to the global media, we're almost invisible. You know, there's nothing on The Athletic at the New York Times. There's nothing in the Wall Street Journal, nothing on ESPN, little amounts of coverage, the Times, the Guardian, the Daily Mail, the Reuters, not really covering a lot of content, the AFP, Associated Press. And there's such an opportunity, particularly at this time of the year. You've got Formula One on break. You've got very early pre-season NFL. You've got no NBA. No Premier League, limited amounts of cricket. Here is this window that we could promote the game and go hard at promoting the game, but we seem to have lost it. So has everyone lost interest in the Rugby Championship, in decision-making positions, Eddie Jones? And what do you think about the end of the Rugby Championship as we know it?
Well, I think no one can doubt the quality of rugby. You know, that's one thing.
Yeah.
And all the PR and all that sort of stuff. Maybe they're short of a quid, mate. They can't afford to spend money on marketing and promotion. Like, that's the only thing you can think of. But
that's the thing, that doesn't cost money though. It's just having a bit of go and getting on the phone and ringing these people up and giving them the stories and creating the content. Because exactly as you say, the rugby will be out of this world. But here is this huge window. Nobody else is in this space. We can be in this space. And for whatever reason, there's just not the energy. There's not the go. There's not the let's get after it. Because the issue is the off-field stuff is what's going to drive the revenue that's going to get the game out of the hole that it's in at the moment. So it's just frustrating.
I think there's probably part of it might be the calendar. The reality is you've put the Wallabies into South Africa, so that works on the South African end, but you've got nothing happening here, right? There's no, in terms of engagement, you haven't got players, you haven't got games, you can't, there's nothing. That doesn't mean you can't do anything, but it seems like everyone goes, well, the team's away, so we'll just put our feet up and wait for them to come back. So then we've got Argentina, and so we'll worry about it then. So I think that there's and New Zealand's in Argentina, so there's nothing happening in this part of the world at the moment in terms of test matches. They're elsewhere. So it's a bit of the sevens thing when the games are all being played somewhere else. So it's hard to be able to get the direct fan engagement, and all the players are somewhere else. So and on different time zones as well. So that and the media's on different time zones. So that might be part of the problem. That's not an excuse. I'm just trying to throw up something that it's a dynamic that people are probably thinking, well, when they come back and play Argentina, we'll promote it then, but you've lost a month in the meantime.
Yeah, and look, I'm sure the Rugby Australia team are exhausted after the Lions tour, and they probably needed a break of some sort, but I just see a window, I see an opportunity, and I just think you've got to double down, invest in it, get the content out there, even if the teams aren't here, get it on the news, get people talking about it, because as Eddie said before, there's going to be nothing wrong with the quality of rugby we see over the weekend. It's going to be first class. But let me just take you to that point.
Pemby, just on that, while New Zealand's touring South Africa, what's Australia doing?
Well,
is there a plan? I don't know.
No, not yet. Right. Not yet. I think they might be ringing Eddie Jones and the Japanese and seeing if they're going to.
is this Australia going to tour Argentina or something like that? Like, is that what? I don't know.
My understanding is that there's no announcement around that yet. They're still trying to work forward and understand that. But this movement to more touring, but certainly, in the early days, their hopes around this particular tournament during the professional era was it was going to become the Southern Hemisphere version of the Six Nations. Eddie Jones, why hasn't it worked? Why is the Rugby Championship in danger of disappearing?
I think it's worked in terms of the quality of rugby, but it hasn't worked in terms of the following. And I think it's the interest in it. And I think it's all the things that you guys have spoken about explains that. It's a hard competition because you got so many different time zones, and particularly with Argentina coming in, you've got another one. So to keep interest in the competition's been hard. You've got the Nations Cup coming up. No one seems to know what's going on. It's all quiet on that again. And, I think one of the ideas they had post with the South Africans and New Zealand going off every second year was to include a couple of sides with Australia and Argentina. But again, that's going to operate, so it's not going to be huge television money. So they're all thinking about what they got to do.
But Ewen McKenzie, just on that point of perhaps the Rugby Championship, the teams Eddie's alluding to there is Fiji and Japan, but with the rugby or the competition for Australia, particularly without South Africa, without the All Blacks, it's sort of heading down scale.
It's hard because Eddie's made the point that the rugby is sort of getting looked after to some extent. I went and downloaded an app yesterday because I was trying to understand the calendar, and I couldn't find a World Rugby app, so I've downloaded something else. But I started looking because I was interested in that. I don't know much about what happens in the Japanese competition, so I thought I'll get an app so I can see what's going on, for instance. And then I wanted to know what was going on in the top 14 in France. So in the end, I downloaded an app, and I can now see all these competitions. There's a heap of games going on, and I didn't appreciate. I never thought laterally enough about it, but there's a lot of games going on all the time. So to get everyone focused on how do you say what's more important? Like they're playing in Japan, they're playing in France, they're all going to be firing up soon. How do you grab someone's attention in France is watching top 14 and say, come on, start watching Argentina play against South Africa? There's only so much that people can do. Time zones help in that sense, but maybe not. There's a lot of rugby going on, so it's hard to market everything. Hard. So and get the media focus on all these different competitions going on. So I just went and got an app just so I could keep up because I feel like I've lost track. And so now I feel like I can at least see who won in the French competition. At five levels down. Then I can watch the UK, and I just want to see who wins and loses. Then I can investigate a game if I want to. But I didn't even know. I didn't even know when the competitions are starting and stopping. That's how much is going on. So there's a lot of rugby content, but we see some of it, and we hear about not much. But how do we get not enough journalists to cover all in an enthusiastic way?
We've spoken about it over the few weeks that we've been started, trying to identify these issues that we've got, in order to help secure the future prosperity of the game around the world. And number one that keeps coming to the top is alignment. There's just nowhere near enough alignment, and there's nowhere near enough awareness. And it's not that hard. I disagree. I don't think it's that hard to actually be able to tell a story of each different competition and shape it in a different way. Eddie Jones made a point a few weeks ago that there used to be a World Rugby wrap-up of what was happening around the world. And, for an hour every week, you could sit down and you would understand where everybody was. But there's opportunities for this, and it's something that we've got to keep at. We absolutely have to keep at trying to bring some alignment and some coherence so as that people around the world can understand, okay. So when you go and talk to the New York Times and say, hey, New York Times, look at this sport over here that you are ignoring at the moment, and get involved. Wall Street Journal, start to compete. Now, the other thing is, I think there's way too much emphasis on social media content and everyone thinking, oh, problem solved, we've got it on socials. Nah, sorry. Media, mainstream media retains huge amount of influence, and we've got to get those big dogs following the game. So that's another task for the Rugby Unity podcast. Now, I do want to get on to the... Sorry, Eddie, you're going to say? Yeah, mate.
If you want to understand why South Africa and New Zealand want to have tours, you just got to look at that Lions tour to Australia. 3 weeks, great soap opera, great drama. What do they average? 70,000 a test in a country now where rugby hasn't been a major force. And that shows you why South Africa and New Zealand want a tour. So, people want to see that, mate. That. And the Rugby Championship, because of the way it is and because of the travel, is hard to follow. And it's too hard to follow. People don't follow it anymore. What they say, that the average person spends 19 seconds on a website because they want things easy. They don't want things hard. And Rugby Championship's hard to follow because it's spread out over time zones and weeks, and there's buys and whatever. Whereas those tours, you capture the attention of people and you do it well.
Well, I agree with you about the tours, and I think, as you say, the narrative arc that will run through the All Black tour to South Africa next year will be compelling, and they will attract huge crowds. And yes, self-contained, easy to follow. But I just think it's like Super Rugby. Super Rugby died because of negligence out of Sansa. That's why it's stumbled and bumbled along, because no one ever cared about it. And I don't think they've ever invested in the brand of the Rugby Championship. And it's just going to go and find a tree, go away to die, which is, I think, a bit of a pity. But listen, I do want to get on to the All Black Argentina game, but I also do want to give, just while we're talking a little bit about the off-field stuff, the All Blacks have announced that they're doing a business conference on the Friday before their match against Ireland in Chicago later in the year. The All Blacks, with the Northern Trust Bank, are going to bring together Wayne Smith's going to be there talking about leadership, talking about the All Blacks way, and then they're going to take the conference participants over to watch the training run before the game the next day. Fantastic initiative, New Zealand Rugby. That's what we want. We want to fill the weeks up. We don't want to just be relying on the revenues on game day. Create revenues every day, all the way through the big test weeks. We need the nightclubs, Kiwi DJs, Irish DJs, art exhibitions. We need cultural things. We just need to own the city for that week. And that's a great start from New Zealand Rugby to go into this idea of a business conference. So well done to them. I hope we see other unions going that way as well, and starting to think about making money for 6 days or for 7 days a week, not 1 day a week. And that's going to help get us out of this hole that we're in, because the game is not financially sustainable, as we all know. Anyway, let's get back to the footy. All Blacks Argentina in Córdoba. Ewen McKenzie, have you ever been to Córdoba? Have you ever played in Córdoba? Have you ever coached in Córdoba? And what can the All Blacks expect when they turn up there this weekend?
No, I haven't been there. I've been to Argentina many times, but haven't been there. So I can't offer you anything other than, I would imagine it's like every other town you play in. You're playing in a venue that's set up for soccer, and a lot of the venues over there have moats around them to stop the fans invading the field. So the fans get into it, and so I'm assuming it'll be the same. But it'll be dry and fast, and it should make for a good game. The selections are interesting. I was just going through the All Blacks. I like the look of the All Blacks side. I think they've got a pack. They're starting to develop a pack selection. I think that's their best, one of their best front rows anyway in terms of set piece. And I like the idea they're playing Vi on the side of the scrum. This Holland big guy in the second row. So there's a good balance there for line out. They've got Duplessis on the ball. He's probably the best on the ball guy they've got. So that gives Sevilla to be able to roam at number 8. They're light on it at halfback options anyway through injury, but the rest of it sort of rolls out as you expect. And you've got the X factor of Will Jordan, he's like Jorgensen. He can make a try out of nothing. So I like the look of their side. I like the look of the All Black side. So I think they're really starting to get some cohesion there. And Argentina, There's a few faces there I don't recognise, but fundamentally it looks like a pretty hard side that's going to be difficult to beat. Eddie'd probably know more about them.
Yeah, well, certainly, Contepomi has brought back a lot of his more experienced players who didn't play against England on the recent tour. Some of them very successful against the Lions, obviously, earlier this year. But Eddie Jones, your thoughts on the well, first of all, have you been to Córdoba? Have you coached at Córdoba? Have you played at Córdoba?
Never been there, mate. But as you said,
there you
go. It'll be fantastic. It'll be a fantastic spectacle. But I like what with Ewen, as Ewen said. I reckon New Zealand picked a heavy front six, and then they got two faster guys with Surveyor and Karevi. The halfback's a good running halfback. Yeah, no, it looks like a good team. And Scott Robinson's second year now, so they understand international rugby a bit better. Selection-wise, he's probably getting close to what he thinks is the strongest team. And I think there'll be plenty of points in this game, mate. Argentina ran a lot against England. I think they'll probably bring that back and kick a little bit more. But they're always hard, flat surfaces. They encourage big scoring games, always like 30 to high 20s type game. It'll be a 60-point game.
Mm-hmm. And your views on the Argentinian team that Felipe Contepomi has selected?
No, they're always fairly, they're consistent around their stable players, and then they bring players in and out. They've always got good young players coming through. The one thing they'll be hard at the breakdown. They'll compete really hard. And maybe New Zealand, just looking at it, will have a fairly strong scrum advantage. And I think, again, the scrum will be an important part of this game. I think in the Rugby Championship, the scrum will come back and be an important part of the game, which it really wasn't in the Lions series.
And what about Contepomi, the Argentinian coach? You have come across him, I'm sure, as a player in Europe, and then I think he sat in the 2-seat as an assistant to Michael Checo during parts of his time at Argentina. What sort of a character is he?
Well, he's a bright guy, mate. Again, he's a medical doctor, well-educated, but loves rugby, good thinker about the game. I can see the way they play. They're always trying to do just small things, little nuanced things around the way they play. Good spirit. When he played, he was one of those guys that helped coach the team. He was in that good Argentina team that made the final in 2007. He's one of those on-field leaders, and he's just continued that into his coaching.
And Ewen, have you come across him in your time?
No, I haven't, but I agree with what Eddie said. He's a smart guy, and he's done his apprenticeship. He's been in and around the Argentina setup. He's been around other coaches. And so I think it's a sort of logical progression. Like, there's a lot of guys that do the same thing, and they take their time and then they get their chance as head coach, and he gets to do it his way. But he hasn't strayed from the core formula. I think the difference for this, I think the 9 and 10 have come back in for this test match. So they had a different 9 and 10 against England. So I think they got their best pairing. So I think that'll make a big difference to how they function as a team. So, and they got quite a few of the guys that played against and beat the British Lions. So that's a fair effort looking back. So I think that they'll be well primed, and they've got form over New Zealand. They've got the capacity. They've got guys in their team that have beaten, and that's one of the mental challenges. You talk about playing South Africa and winning at Ellis Park and things like that, and winning the Bledisloe. Sometimes you got to find players that haven't only known defeat. Now Argentina's full of guys that have actually known success against the All Blacks in New Zealand, and so they can approach the game with great confidence. So I think it looks pretty well set up for a good game, as Eddie said. I don't think the All Blacks are going to lie down. So I think it's going to be a pretty positive game. So, but you do need players that understand and know how to win. And sometimes you can look back and you go, I'm picking guys here, and they've never actually. You're asking him to do something they've never done. Right, go out and win the Bledisloe Cup. Oh, I've never done it. Well, no one's done it. So there's no one. Like, I mean, Eddie and I were the last coaches to win, to be involved in a win. And that was the Yonks. So far, so it is hard to find. So sometimes you got to move people aside and keep trying to find another guy that hasn't experienced losing. The only thing that's ahead of them is a win, and that's what Argentina did. And they've got young guys there that have only really they've had. If you looked at their resume, they've probably got 50% win record against the All Blacks. That's pretty damn good.
So, what's going to happen? Give us a result in Córdoba this weekend.
Pretty tight. I'm going to go the All Blacks. All Blacks by 5.
Okay. And Eddie Jones, what can I squeeze out of you?
Oh, just looking at their team again, they got Argentina 2 strong centres like Chocobar and Cynthia, really good, strong running centres. And then Kramer, I don't think, played against England. Yeah, he's one of those glue players, big guy, carries hard, hits hard, contests hard.
Loves the yellow card. Loves the yellow card. Loves the yellow card.
He could be on TAB. He could be special for the yellow card.
Exactly. Yeah.
35-33, All Blacks.
Okay, both of you for the All Blacks. Well, there you go. All right, well, there's certainly a lot to look forward to this weekend. And before I let you go, we do talk about the third voice here at the Rugby Unity podcast as we look to help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. And we do need to understand what rugby fans are talking about. Just a couple of questions before you go from Jerry Bursky. Lovely stories. Has Ewen McKenzie written his autobiography yet? It is sure to be a very interesting one, as those days usually has the best stories. Ewen, have you written a book, or are you planning to write a book?
No. I'll leave Eddie. Eddie can do the storytelling. No.
That's your next job. The missing link.
Oh, Pemby. Pemby's always angling.
Actually, your story would be a good story. Well, I'll tell you. Well, I had to revive Eddie Jones's book, his first one just before the 2019 Rugby World Cup. Things went south in the north of Italy, and he downed tools, and he had a editor's guide to or a deadline to meet, and he couldn't do it. So anyway, that was a funny day. Okay, another question. From Ingram 1051. Great insight, gents. Do the international teams really need tough opposition to get in form? A team like the Springboks played 50-odd players last year. Do they not get enough physicality in their practice sessions to prepare them for the games? Eddie Jones, can practice replace matches?
Well, you get the physicality, but you don't get the timing. You know, timing's such a big part of rugby because we've got 2 lines moving, and you only get that timing from playing in games, the real timing, because it's, you know, there's just so much contact you can do at training, and particularly now with the physical condition of the players, you've got to watch carefully how much contact you do, and you can't overdo the contact and reality, the only time you get to practice the timing is when you're doing it at full pace and full contact. So games are so important. You see, you might see with South Africa at the start of the game, their timing could be out because they haven't played against a really physical team.
Yeah. Ewen McKenzie?
Oh, I agree 100%. It's all about timing, and if you're training in a squad environment, everyone knows what the game plan is. So when you're training against players that know what the game plan is and know what the tactics are, so they know what the calls are as well. So again, it doesn't, it's sort of there, but not quite. You need to be playing to get your timing right against players that don't know what you're trying to do.
All right, and a final question here. Please keep the questions and comments coming either on the YouTube or at sending us an email or on Instagram or wherever else you're engaging with us. But a final question to both of you. It's from Brian from Mooloolaba. Given the altitude of Ellis Park, how will that affect the boys? It's a major consideration to prepare for both teams, let alone the hostile environment they'll experience. Now, That's a reasonable question, though, that obviously the Australians have come across to altitude, but not every one of the South African players is from altitude. So how does it impact the two teams? The home team, who is a mix of players who are at altitude and not at altitude, and the Australian team who are not from altitude. Ewen McKenzie.
Well, the players there obviously play, half of the Currie Cup games are at altitude, so they move in and out, so they probably acquire some sort of familiarity. The technical thing that obviously you get a burn in your throat and the ball travels further, so you've got to be able to deal with that, particularly from a kicking point of view. You can kick the ball longer, you can take longer shots at goal, the ball's going to go higher in the air, so all of those things are things you've got to be able to deal with. They'll just be simply more practice, even if they don't live at altitude. They're used to adapting for those environments, whereas Australia, you've got a bunch of guys there who've never been to South Africa, so in the team, so that's all ahead of them. So hopefully they've able to talked about it. But part of it, you can't do anything about it. So the fact that you're going to be burning in the throat and feeling a bit short of breath at some point is you can't do anything about it. So that's where the coach comes into play, and you might have to make substitutions maybe with Skelton and Tupu. Those guys mightn't get as many minutes on the field. So that might be a reaction, but that'll be managed by the coach, not the player.
All right. And the final word on that, Eddie Jones, your thoughts?
Just a couple of things to add without going over it again. The Sharks in South Africa have generally had a better record than anyone at altitude. And one of the things is they train in humid conditions, and they build up the capability to handle the heat, because the altitude burns your throat a bit, and you got to learn to recover from that. So that's one thing. So your preparation, you can do preparation for that. Get the players used to that, train with heaters on, all that sort of thing to get themselves ready. But as Ewan said, the coach has got a big job to just manage the rotation, right? Not leaving someone out there one play too long, which can cost you the game. Being quite aggressive in your changes.
All righty. Well, I think that might just wrap it up for this week, boys. I know you're both busy and you've got things to do. Eddie Jones, I'll let you get back to getting yourself ready for the test matches ahead for Japan. And Ewen McKenzie, you're a busy man, so thank you for spending some time with us today. And again, to you, the audience, thank you. It's just a thrill this week to see so many of you tune in to our little program. And we certainly look forward to continuing to bring you content that we hope is going to get some conversation going about how do we help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. You can but please subscribe would be great on any podcatcher on YouTube, but hit that subscribe button because that helps us to be found. Also, put your comments, please, into the comments as well so we can respond and understand and get those questions. Keep them coming. Keep the comments coming because we do want to feature you here on the program. You can also follow us on Substack. Jump across there. There are all sorts of interesting content that's on the Substack. And again, the link to the Substack is in the show notes. So, till next week, please be kind to each other. My name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.